Well, our Soapbox Social panel is here again amid aftershocks to yesterday's news that BC United is suspending their election campaign. And today, Todd Stone, the BC United MLA who has represented Kamloops South Thompson since 2013, announced he would not run again this year.
Columnists together to defeat the NDP and get BC moving forward again. So earlier this week, I made the difficult decision that the best thing that I could do right now to support our coalition was to take a step back and withdraw my candidacy in this next election. I let Kevin Falcon know of my intentions on Tuesday morning.
So joining us here in studio with their thoughts is our Soapbox Social panel. Kyla Lee is a Vancouver criminal lawyer for Acumen Law Corporation. Hello.
Hello.
And Mo Amir is the host of the podcast This is Van Color. Hello to you.
Hi, Gloria.
Okay, here we are. We heard from Todd Stone. About 2 hours ago, Shirley Bond, BC United's MLA for Prince George Valemont, long-time sitting MLA, also announced she's withdrawing as a candidate in the upcoming election. Kyla, what do you make of the decision by these two long-time politicians?
I mean, I can't imagine my life without Shirley Bond figuring it in it some way. She's been around since as long as I can remember. But I think this sort of gives an idea of how deep the rot really went in the whole BC United situation before this has happened. And also, I think I've always had a soft spot for Todd Stone. I think that looking at what the other option is to go join the Conservatives or to go join the NDP, neither of them are great options. Both of these politicians have sort of very clearly and vociferously voiced their opposition to both parties. And sitting as an independent or running as an independent is kind of not a great idea. So I'm not surprised, but I'm confused.
Well, we know that there's going to be a long process now, Mo, that the message was BC Conservatives, BC United, they would put their best candidates forward here. So you would think people like Todd Stone and Shirley Bond would be the best candidates. But
I think the BC Conservatives hold all the cards here. I mean, even in this basic agreement, it's not like it's not like BC United has any guarantees to have their people in. I mean, BC Conservatives could technically tomorrow just say, you know what, we're not going to take any BC United MLAs. I don't think that's going to be the case. But the reality is that BC United doesn't have any leverage. And it is, it's kind of an ungracious way for someone like Shirley Bond or Todd Stone to leave the life of elected office. You would think that they would get something in the legislature, as usually is the case when people announce that they're not going to run again. But to go out this way, again, the withdrawal is a bit of a formality and them trying to go out on a classy way. But the reality is they were basically forced out of this election.
Right. Well, BC Conservative leader John Rustad, he took calls from listeners today on BC Today with Michelle Elliott. And one listener asked if there was room in his party for people who believe LGBTQ citizens should be treated with dignity and respect. And the host, Michelle Elliott, she followed up with a comment.
But you want to remove the SOGI 123 resource.
So what I am opposed to is I'm opposed to the sexualization of kids in our schools and the material that's there. What I want to do is I want to make sure that we have a very strong anti-bullying program and that we have supports in place, because I know sometimes students can really struggle, particularly with families, and we need to be able to support those and support right through to families. And what SOGI has become is a lightning rod, denying parents their rights to be able to understand what's going on with their child in a school. That to me is wrong. Parents have rights.
John Rustad on BC Today with Michelle Elliott today. So, Kyla, as you hear that, let's talk about a big tent, this big tent that the Conservatives are trying to put up right now. How big a tent do you think they can actually bring to the province?
I mean, with Eleanor Sturko having already joined the party, I think, they are getting bigger, especially with respect to issues that affect the LGBTQ2S+ community. But at the same time, you have John Rustad just making comments, essentially saying we want a strong anti-bullying campaign while using bullying remarks that essentially accuse queer people of preying on children at the same time. So I don't know. For me, when I hear something like that, it immediately turns me off. And I think a lot of other people who might otherwise, want to go a little bit center right are going to be turned off by that as well.
Do you remember Mary Polak? Because she was kind of infamous for wanting to ban books in schools along these same lines, that they represented queer families in books or whatever. You also had Laurie Throness, who stood in the BC Liberal caucus for quite some time. There was a time when this free enterprise coalition had people who believed in these things, but it was never really front and center of what the party stood for. I mean, the BC Liberals, to their credit, were the party that brought in SOGI, despite having Mary Polak in the caucus. So I think where the shift is here is that a lot of these issues now seem to be more front of mind for this party, more so than it was for the BC Liberals in the past.
Well, not everyone in BC United is going to happily go to the Conservatives, and it's going to be interesting over the coming days just to hear some of those decisions become more public. West Vancouver Capilano MLA Karen Kirkpatrick, she's going to be on the early edition tomorrow with Stephen Quinn tomorrow morning. She tweeted out today, "Here's a conundrum for our friends on the right. Did their masterminds consider that all of the middle-of-the-road voters would be forced to swing to the left? So they have not only consolidated the right, they have also consolidated the center-left." You're both nodding here. Mo, what do you think? How much BC United support do you think could migrate to the NDP?
Honestly, I think it's a bit of a wash. I think it's going to be somewhat of an even split. Certainly in the north and in certain interior ridings, you'll see this increase in BC Conservative support where whatever remained of BC United or their support will move over. But ultimately, I do think that the split of the remnants of BC United support is going to be split relatively evenly between the BC NDP and the BC Conservatives. There may be some ridings that are suddenly a little more competitive, maybe ridings like that exist in Langley. But ultimately, first of all, none of us know. But just based on the data that we have, whatever little support is left, I would say it splits pretty evenly without much electoral consequence as of now.
Well, the NDP leader and the premier of the province, David Eby, he was on the early edition this morning, and here's how he responded when asked if he was surprised with yesterday's news.
I guess the surprise really is that the unification was around a party and a leader who doesn't believe that climate change is real, that doesn't think we should be taking climate action. It appears on podcasts like Jordan Peterson's, who thinks that the problems in society started when women got access to birth control, and that 5G cell phone towers are weapons of genocide. I mean, these are really bizarre views to unify around.
Bizarre views. Okay. Kind of what do you think of the Premier's tactic of framing the Conservatives as a fringe party?
I think that that's a more effective tactic than some of the other tactics that we also see them playing out, because the more they frame the Conservatives as a fringe party, the more you're going to get those, very sort of center waffling voters who probably would have voted BC United if they hadn't, totally collapsed, to attract to the NDP as the more sensible, logical party that is not going to embrace these, radical, strange, unscientific ideas.
What do you think, Mo?
Well, we'll see how this candidate shakeup ends up panning out, right? Like if the BC Conservatives do purge themselves of some problematic candidates within their nomination lists, maybe they've suddenly taken away a big hammer from the BC NDP to say that, you had these candidates that said these kooky things and harmful things as well. So we'll kind of see how it plays out, and we'll see what the appetite is for the electorate to focus on issues like this one nominee in this one region said this one thing one time, or like this problematic tweet. Again, it remains to be seen, I think.
Well, and the campaign's kicking into gear now,
Sure
especially.
is.
I think they're probably going to wait on the Conservative side just to see exactly how they're going to position themselves. BC NDP, they rolled out 2 new video ads on the social media platform X today. One of them outlined the party's achievements. The other blamed John Rustad for doubling MSP rates, hiking car insurance rates, doubling housing costs. So how much do you think those economic criticisms are going to stick to the BC Conservatives, Mo?
I thought housing costs also went up under Premier David Eby and the BC NDP. Like that was kind of the weird one in that negative attack ad against John Rustad. I really think that, David Eby, it's time to put his dukes up and he's got to start clobbering. So I do think that they should go negative, but they should really point out things like things that really differentiate the two parties. Airbnb, John Rustad has been very clear that he wants to repeal that legislation. They could talk about the BC Liberal / maybe BC Conservative opposition to the speculation and vacancy tax when it comes to economics. I think the MSP is a winner. I think that was good. Certainly, the affordability crisis is going to be an issue, but I think the BC NDP has to be very careful as opposed to not bring up things that happened in the past and things that the electorate can pin on the BC NDP themselves.
Okay. In all of this melee right now, Kyla, where do you see the Greens? Where do they fit into the picture?
Okay, Mo's not going to agree with me on this at all, but I think this is actually going to potentially be helpful to the Greens. I think there are going to be people who view the NDP in response to what's just happened as moving closer to the center, shifting further right, and there are going to be people who are already thinking about, maybe I don't want to go with the NDP anymore. Maybe they're too centrist for me. The things that I care about are better represented by the Greens, and I think you will see some attrition to the Greens as the NDP responds to this and tries to attract those former, BC United voters.
Okay, before we let you go, Mo, grab your crystal ball. Do you want to make any of your famous predictions in light of the week's events?
Yeah, I think in the new year, in 2025, I think Kevin Falcon is going to be working a very cushy private sector job, perhaps from an employer who is a big supporter of the BC Conservatives. By coincidence. By mere coincidence. Yeah.
Kyla, do you want to add any predictions of your own?
I'll throw a crazy one out there. We're going to go back to an NDP Green coalition government.
How do you make a coalition with a party that has 0 seats?
We'll have that conversation after October 19th. Thanks very much to you both.
Gloria.
That is Soapbox Social. Mo Amir is the host of the This Is Vancouver podcast. Kyla Lee is a criminal lawyer for Acumen Law Corporation.